First of all, many thanks to the Norad Evaluation Department and the Norwegian government for hosting this seminar. Norway's been at the forefront of international peace efforts for many decades and has been a strong, steadfast supporter of the UN since its founding. The UN Development Program Evaluation Office is fortunate to have forged a close partnership with the Norad Evaluation Department during the past decade, and we look forward to continuing this successful collaboration. My remarks this morning concern an evaluation that the Independent Evaluation Office of UNDP recently carried out, focused on support to conflict-affected countries in the context of integrated peace operations. The evaluation was carried out in 2012 at the request of the UNDP Executive Board, following a similar study that was commissioned in 2006. I'm an evaluation advisor for the UNDP Evaluation Office, and I task managed this effort. And we were ably supported by a consultant team led by a good colleague John Bennett, a high-regarded conflict expert based at Oxford. As with all of our evaluations, UNDP management subsequently developed a management response, setting out how the agency intends to act on the recommendations. The management response is included as an annex to the published evaluations, to all of our published evaluations, and I'm very pleased that Stan is here with us today, who's the Deputy Director for the UNDP Bureau for Crisis Prevention and Recovery, who will provide the management views and have some discussion on their response to this evaluation after I complete my comments. So, the objectives for the evaluation were twofold. First, to assess how UNDP programming and policies support peace building within the framework of international peace operations, and how UNDP supports a country's transition from immediate post-conflict development, and then second, to evaluate how UNDP response mechanisms function at headquarters and operational levels during periods of transition in conflict-affected countries. The evaluation was conducted using a combination of case studies, desk-based research, and interviews with a wide range of stakeholders. The evaluation incorporates findings from 9 primary case study countries: Burundi, Côte d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of Congo, Haiti, Lebanon, Liberia, Somalia, South Sudan, and Timor-Leste, which were visited and studied in depth. We included an additional 11 secondary case studies using source material. The sample represents roughly 60% of countries worldwide that host an integrated UN mission. We acknowledge in the evaluation that UNDP effectiveness and performance are very context-specific, and that there are inevitable gaps in the evidence. As all practitioners working in post-conflict settings readily acknowledge, there are considerable constraints in obtaining evidence, especially historical data. Earlier this month, I was in Afghanistan on a fact-finding mission for our evaluation of UNDP's country program there. Travel is exclusively by armored car, interviews are held in fortified offices, and the tenure of most international experts in country is less than 2 years. So while documentation fills many gaps, it can't capture the full extent of the difficulties that UN staff and their national counterparts encounter daily. Let me give you a little bit now on the context for peace building in which UNDP is working in these areas, in these conflict-affected countries. The evaluation delves into the international context for support to conflict-affected countries, and we note that the evolution of integrated missions since 1997 and the rising expectations for UNDP. The Brahimi report in 2000 fundamentally changed the way UNDP approaches its work in conflict-affected countries. Partially informed by shortcomings in the 1990s, the Brahimi report articulated the need to more closely link peace operations and political processes with broader development activities in order to comprehensively address conflict situations. At the time of this evaluation, there were 17 peace operations being led globally by the UN Department of Peacekeeping Operations and an additional 15 political and peacebuilding field missions managed by the Department of Political Affairs. Since 2000, the number of UN political peacekeeping and peacekeeping missions, peacekeeping and peacebuilding missions has more than doubled, and with a consequent growth in expenditures. At the end of 2010, the UN maintained 110,000 military, police, and civilian peacekeeping personnel in the field with an annual budget expenditure of over $7 billion. UNDP is a somewhat amorphous entity that defies easy description. Outside observers typically believe that we are focused on poverty alleviation. Yet poverty is just one of a wide array of support pillars, together with governance, environmental protection, capacity development, the fight against HIV/AIDS, and empowering women, that encompass the work of UNDP across 147 country offices. Within the crisis prevention pillar, UNDP typically supports security sector reform, disarming, demobilizing, and rehabilitating former combatants, mine clearing support, establishing job creation programs such as cash for work for debris removal, supporting government capacity building, supporting rule of law programs, etc. UNDP relies heavily on non-donor contributions to fund its program activities. In 2010, 70% of UNDP's global country program expenditure was funded through other donor resources. In countries where an integrated peacekeeping operation has been deployed, UNDP programming expenditures often jump discernibly, reflecting both elevated needs and greater international attention. In Timor-Leste, for example, there was a 30% jump in UNDP program expenditures in the year following deployment of UN peacekeepers. The program expenditures across the 20 conflict-affected countries that we looked at and were selected for this evaluation account for over a third of UNDP's programming expenditures between 2005 and 2010. And it should be kept in mind that just one of those countries, Afghanistan, alone accounts for a significant portion of UNDP's global program expenditures, roughly 16% of total global expenditures. The evaluation sets out a series of findings across a broad set of issues. This morning I want to just comment on 6 of them. UNDP's comparative advantages and consequent risks, its capacity to do conflict analysis, UNDP work to improve government capacity, technical support for electoral systems, empowering women, and then to provide just a few comments on peace-building partnerships. UNDP's comparative advantages are perceived to be its on-the-ground presence, close partnership with government, role as a bridge between humanitarian, peace-building, and development efforts, and a key role in governance and institutional change in the management of conflict. Yet one of the inherent disadvantages of UNDP's presence in a country before, during, and after a crisis is that it builds a historical expectation that the organization will respond positively to the wide-ranging requests for support that it receives. In Somalia and Afghanistan, for example, UNDP has been subject to significant donor pressure to implement activities that go well beyond its development mandate. Serving as a provider of last resort is perhaps inevitable given UNDP's on-the-ground presence, yet this runs the real risk of ad hoc and overly ambitious support programs, entangled by limited financial and human resources and sometimes slow delivery. These constraints can severely impede UNDP performance, and we can witness this, for instance, just by a recently released unsatisfactory audit of UNDP's work in Afghanistan. International development actors, including UNDP, broadly recognize the importance of conflict analysis when engaging in conflict-affected settings. Its use is based on the reasoning that a comprehensive understanding of a given conflict context and the broader international responses will guide strategic engagement for development activities. It'll enable program flexibility based on knowledge of potential contract drivers, and it'll engender a general do-no-harm approach to interventions. Yet despite this recognition of the importance of conflict analysis and the development of conflict analysis tools, UNDP has not been able to establish standard operating procedures for when and how to conduct conflict analysis. As a result, its conduct in both substantive and procedural terms varies widely across the organization's work. Positive country-level experiences do exist and serve to underline the value of conducting and regularly updating these analyses. For instance, as a result of its conflict analysis work, the UNDP Nepal Country Office was able to provide vital strategic oversight throughout the country's civil war and subsequent peace-building process. In Sudan, UNDP has carried out geo-referenced state-by-state mapping and analysis of key security threats, including socioeconomic risks. The mapping effort was subsequently expanded into a conflict risk and mapping assessment covering Eastern Sudan. This exercise helped UNDP identify hotspots, prioritize interventions, and improve coordination with the wider aid community. I would say the strongest urging that we have given in this evaluation is for UNDP to significantly enhance the quality and use of conflict analysis at the country level, seeing this as an essential tool of value to the entire UN country team and essential for rapid engagement and scaling up as crises unfold. As demonstrated in Haiti, the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, Timor-Leste, and especially Afghanistan, UNDP typically works with governments to establish project support units operating in parallel to the national civil service. The wage and benefit incentives used to attract talented staff often create major distortions in the public service labor market. While proving to be more rapid, this method can, and recognizing that this method can enhance the pace and quality of service delivery, it also runs the risk of weakening institutions that countries must rely on over the long term. In an August 2011 report on civilian capacity in the aftermath of conflict, the Secretary General drew attention to this problem and made clear the need to, quote, avoid any negative impact on national capacity development, for example, the brain drain of local capacity to international and bilateral organizations. An additional aspect of capacity building relates to the fact that the building of strong and inclusive local government is also regarded as a benchmark of sustainability in the peace-building process in post-conflict environments, yet international support has not always been sufficient or timely. UNDP figures confirm this lack of attention. In 2008-2009, 70% of expenditures in non-fragile countries went to local governance. In contrast, in fragile countries, local governance accounted for only 14% of expenditures, of which the largest portion, 29%, was spent on law and justice reform. UNDP is widely perceived as an experienced and impartial provider of electoral support, with notable examples of effective assistance in several conflict-affected countries. Electoral support is a coordinated effort within integrated missions, but it's not without pitfalls. Technical inputs remain overemphasized, and there have been cases where the political concerns of an operation, particularly those pertaining to keeping a peace agreement on track, have clashed with the more immediate concerns of UNDP over political plurality in elections. In Sudan, tensions between the UN integrated mission and the UN country team came to a head when security concerns were perceived as systematically prevailing over democratic election concerns. The mission was apparently reluctant to raise any sensitive issues with Khartoum for fear of destabilizing the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement. As a result, UNDP was left negotiating the involvement of civil society and non-governmental organizations with little political backup from the mission. Moving on to another very important aspect that's mentioned in the evaluation, we note that UNDP has made a concerted effort to support greater security and participation for women through legal reform, participation in political processes, and livelihood opportunities. We note that UNDP is currently supporting programming in gender-based violence in 22 countries in both development and crisis contexts. UNDP also promotes gender quota systems in political parties, and we note that the interim constitution of Southern Sudan stipulated a 25% quota for women's participation at all levels of government. I would note that there are some concerns now with how quota systems then play out. I was involved to develop our evaluation of our work in Egypt, and Egypt had a long-standing quota system for women in the lower house, the Shura Council. And when the new government came in, the change from the Mubarak administration, the presence of 83 appointed women was viewed as not an opportunity for women, but rather an opportunity for the Mubarak and his cronies to pad the Shura Council with persons that were favorable to their views. So it was immediately disbanded. Now we have a new Shura Council where we have 18 women that were able to get in through the full elections process. But so this effort to develop quotas has to be seen as a short term, and certainly there are pitfalls in taking that effort. We note in the evaluation that UNDP has a mixed record of accomplishment in terms of the gender balance for its own workforce in conflict-affected countries. In post-crisis Côte d'Ivoire, in 2011, UNDP employed only 2 women, neither in key posts. The poor gender ratio is replicated in the integrated missions, for instance, in Afghanistan and elsewhere. We recognize the difficulties in attracting women to hardship posts, but urge in the evaluation for UNDP to increase efforts to prepare and place female staff in conflict settings and to set tighter benchmarks for country offices to meet gender targets. Let me make a few then, as I begin to wind up here, I'll make a few comments on the discussion within the evaluation on our partnerships with our colleagues from other parts of the UN system. UNDP plays a coordinating role within integrated missions in crisis situations, straddling the political, humanitarian, and development dimensions. Management effectiveness in these missions is highly context-specific. Conceptual and operational issues between UNDP and its security, political, and humanitarian partners often revolve around inherent tensions between the time-bound nature and technical approach of a peace operation versus the longer UNDP development agenda with its focus on local capacity building. Another issue for UNDP is the relatively short donor timeframes in conflict-affected settings, which limits the scope and scale of some UNDP interventions. The Integrated Mission Planning Process, IMPP, has provided a useful and structured mechanism for ensuring UNDP involvement at the inception of peacekeeping missions, yet our case studies indicate that UNDP influence in the process remains relatively small compared to the security and political concerns of other actors. UNDP partnership with the Department of Political Affairs in some Security Council mandated integrated peacebuilding offices, for instance Burundi and Sierra Leone, has demonstrated the utility of combining development activities and political processes in a closer way. We indicate in the evaluation that UNDP should make greater efforts to translate corporate management cooperation between UNDP, DPKO for peacekeeping, the Department for Political Affairs, and of course OCHA, to the specifics of country priorities and the sequencing of interventions. This would imply a more central role for UNDP in the planning stages, at the beginning of integrated missions and throughout the transition from peacekeeping to peacebuilding, including the drawdown of integrated missions. Clear corporate guidelines and criteria should be developed to ensure the organizations are adequately prepared for their enhanced role during these phases. So that's a quick sweep through of the evaluation. We appreciate very much this opportunity, and I certainly look forward to questions and comments following the chance for Stan to comment on some of the management response issues. Thank you.